the same time, as middle-class English people are faced with higher and higher taxes, how are deficit reduction and the control of spending doing? The answer is not very well. The coalition's budgetary plans under Tory Chancellor George Osborne have gone completely awry. Public spending as a share of GDP has risen from an alarming 48% under Labour to 49.9% today. And as a result, the entire political culture of Britain has moved leftwards. To quote the shrewd political commentator from Scotland, Ian Martin, all sorts of ideas that a decade ago would have been regarded as potty, mad in American English, are now mainstream. The government owning enormous shareholding in banks springs to mind. Adding £1 trillion to the national debt is another. A government with Conservatives in charge of the Treasury is dragging millions more into the 40% tax band with such relentlessness that one wonders whether George Osborne hopes eventually to make 40% the new flat rate tax paid by middle-class Britain. This inertial drift is rooted ultimately in Cameron's detoxification strategy, which, as I said, amounted in essence to a firm refusal to challenge metropolitan liberal opinion on anything whatsoever. So Cameronism failed the second test, the test of government in government. What of the third? Early accounts of the political thinking of Cameron strategists stressed that policy should aim at winning centrist Lib Dem votes rather than natural right-wing ones. Some strategists even argued that the Tory party should deliberately and visibly alienate National Conservatives as a way of demonstrating to the target centrist voters that the party was sincere in rejecting its nasty, as is realistic, image and its equally nasty supporters. Well, the test of that policy came last month when there was a special election in the parliamentary constituency of Eastleigh. Now, Eastleigh is situated on the southern English coast between Southampton and Winchester, just opposite the Isle of Wight. The constituency is a picturesque agglomeration of small towns and villages with such names as Butlocks End, Hamble-le-Rice, Burlesdon and Old Netley, Hedge End, Wildern, straight out of that television series which some of you may have seen, The Midsummer Murders. It might almost be an archetypal stretch of old Tory England, which indeed it used to be, returning Conservative MPs with majorities of between 13,000 and 20,000 for 30 years, until 1994. And then, in a midsummer-like, murder-like plot, the Tory MP there was discovered dead, lying on a kitchen table, wearing suspenders and ladies' stockings, with an orange in his mouth and an electric flex around his neck. Having seemingly embarked upon an experiment in autoerotic asphyxiation and self-bondage. That went wrong. The third party Liberal Democrats won that seat in the special election in '94, and they've held it ever since. A month ago, however, Eastleigh's most recent Member of Parliament, Liberal Democrat MP Chris Hume, also a senior cabinet minister, resigned from Parliament, pleaded guilty to perverting the cause of justice. He had persuaded his wife to claim falsely she was driving his car when the police found it speeding. And he was sentenced to 8 months in. You have to say, British politics is interesting. But that scandal was multiplied tenfold by allegations in the very week of the election that a former Liberal Democrat electoral chief, Lord Renard, had applied wandering hands to the legs and bottoms of aspiring Lib Dem women. And there was even loose talk of a Liberal Democrat casting couch, which, when we recall that politics is show business for ugly people, is not something you want to think of. Against such a background, the Tories should have robbed her. Instead, they came in third. 3,000 votes behind the successful Lib Dem candidate, and worse, 1,000 votes behind the upstart United Kingdom Independence Party, UKIP, a party which had been deliberately created by their own policies. this party is composed of the nasty Tories that the party wanted and succeeded in driving out. Well, that party is now a serious threat. Because once a party breaks through a certain credibility barrier, it can multiply its votes very quickly. The Tories therefore face electoral competition on their right for the first time since democracy was introduced into Britain. And it's a serious threat which they've created with themselves. Even if UKIP gets only 6% support, it's now getting 17% in the polls, that will go down. But even if it gets only 6%, that would complete the conditions for an almost certain Tory defeat in the 2015 election. And by the way, not just a defeat, but potential landslide. All of which leaves Prime Minister David Cameron in a very lonely place. As far as the world knows, David Cameron never wears ladies' stockings, only uses an electric flex to turn on the light, and believes that the sole purpose of oranges is to serve as part of a healthy diet. But Cameronism looks increasingly like an experiment in autoerotic asphyxiation and self-bondage. And it's going wrong. Before you respond, it can't happen here, let me point out that it has happened here. I mean, not the autoerotic asphyxiation, so remember Ross Perot? He was almost certainly the repository of conservative Republicans disappointed by the failure of the first Bush administration, in particular, its breaking of the No New Taxes pledge. Deciding to ignore your own voters, deciding to reject your own base, is a sure route to losing. It is, you may notice, not a mistake that Democrats ever make. But a winning politics has to do more than simply secure its electoral base. It also has to expand it. It has to win over the voters we are losing. If half-loaf liberalism and the appeasement of the cultural left is not the route to winning new votes, what is? Many answers could be given to this question, and perhaps you might want to discuss some of them in questions. But let me concentrate on one. What is needed above all is a shattering of the caricature that defines Republicans as uncaring and largely concerned with the interests of the well-to-do. As long as this caricature prevails, critical masses of voters will continue to base their votes on the perceived decency of one side rather than the value of the competing ideas of each side, to the acute disadvantage of the GOP. Now, achievable shifts in the cohort of caring voters can produce major electoral shifts. For example, if Romney had lost the caring voters by a landslide margin of 61 to 38 rather than 81 to 18, he would almost certainly have been elected. Achieving such shifts and defeating the left's caricature of the GOP's conservatism can be greatly enhanced by giving priority status to issues that exemplify caring and altruism, but do so at low cost or even at zero cost, because we cannot be seen to break the budget and to behave irresponsibly. What are they? Well, elsewhere, Michael Horowitz and I, Michael is a former, he was a member of the Reagan administration, have called the initiatives we're talking about here Wilberforce agenda reforms after the great 19th century British statesman and Christian activist who led the fight to end the international slave trade. But, you know, they could equally well be called the Lincoln agenda after the other great liberator of the 19th century. The initiatives that comprise this agenda are non-utopian, realistic, low-cost efforts to protect millions of people at home and abroad who would otherwise not be heard or helped. I'm going to just give you a few here, and you might want to discuss them later, but here they are.
GrokTV.